desses acordos, cálculo de valores, de indenização, tudo isso integra a especialidade dele. Professor Feinberg, do you hear us?
I can hear you well. I hope you can hear me from Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much. We would like to thank you for the acceptance to our invitation to speak today. We are here in the State Attorney General Office, and thank you very much for being with us.
I'm glad to be here today. I wish I could have joined you in person, but at least this is a substitute, and I hope it will be adequate.
Perfect. We hope to have you in Rio at some point also. How do you want to do this? Do you want to start with your considerations and then we go through questions?
That'll be fine. If you let me know, do you want me to discuss the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund and other funds like that, like the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico? Are those subjects that are current and important to you in this conference?
That's the subject. That's the point. Thank you very much.
Let me explain that in the United States, with the legal system that we have enjoyed for centuries, when you have a disaster, a tragedy, whether it's the 9/11 terrorist attacks, whether it is the Deepwater Horizon oil rig explosion in the Gulf of Mexico, or whether it is an attack like the Boston Marathon bombings a few years ago. In all of these programs, there is a request by our elected officials, the Congress, President Bush, President Obama, the governor of Massachusetts. They decide to design and have someone administer a unique compensation program, compensation funding for individual victims. Now, the best example, I think, for Brazil and what I know about Brazilian tragedy is the fund that was created after the Deepwater Horizon oil rig explosion in 2011, 2012, and the requirement by Congress, the United States Congress, and President Obama to establish a special compensation program funded entirely by BP, the oil company in charge of the Deepwater Horizon rig explosion. President Obama urged BP to create a very special, unique compensation program to compensate the families of those killed during the explosion, as well as those businesses and individuals who suffered economic harm. Now, can you still hear me on this Zoom?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, because I lost the pic. That's all right, as long as you can hear me. That's important.
We suppressed our own picture just to see you bigger, but we are here.
That's fine. That's perfectly okay. So, President Obama told BP, I want you to upfront $20 billion. And the $20 billion will be used to compensate victims and their families. And I have asked an independent administrator be appointed, Kenneth Feinberg. I want him, not you, I want him to design and administer a compensation program to compensate the families of those killed, about a dozen that were killed on the rig, to compensate those physically injured on the rig. There were about 8. And then I want Mr. Feinberg to create a compensation program to compensate economic harm, financial harm to businesses and individuals, fishermen, oyster harvesters, shrimp companies, shrimp harvesters, tourist companies that take tourist passengers out onto the Gulf of Mexico. I want all individual businesses and large corporations to be compensated, if they are eligible, for the harm they suffered, the revenue they suffered, the lost revenue. Well, over 16 months, we designed and administered, at President Obama's request, a compensation program. We determined who was eligible based on a formula. We determined how much money they should receive from BP based on a calculation. And in 16 months, this is absolutely fascinating. In 16 months, I received 1,250,000 claims from every state in the United States and from 65 foreign countries, including about 24 claims from businesses in Brazil. And in 16 months, where I administered this program, I paid to eligible victims and businesses $6.5 billion. I received 1,250,000 claims, found about 550,000 eligible. Over half were not eligible. 550,000 businesses and individuals, and I paid them $6.5 billion. And in return, each of those individual businesses signed a document: I will not go to court. I take this money instead of compensation. The program was a success. Over 92% of all those eligible voluntarily agreed. You didn't have to. They voluntarily agreed to accept the compensation and sign a release. Now, generally, and then I'll take questions. Generally, there were 4 different types of payment. Death on the rig. Second, physical injury on the rig or in the cleanup. Third, economic loss for current damages. Current damages. I can't fish. I can't shrimp harvest. The Gulf oil has closed the Gulf of Mexico. I can't shrimp. I can't oyster harvest. I can't fish. I can't take tourists on sightseeing. Current economic harm, calculated and paid. Finally, very important, right now I will pay for current and future economic harm. Mr. Feinberg, I am a shrimp harvester. Because of the rig explosion, I have lost $200,000 since the rig exploded up to the date of my application. But how long will it be before I can shrimp again in the Gulf of Mexico? How long will it take for my shrimp beds to be rid of the oil? It could be 5 or 10 years before I can shrimp again. Well, I retained a marine biologist nationally recognized in the United States. And the marine biologist said it will be 4 years before shrimping can return to the Gulf of Mexico. I offered the shrimp harvester a choice. I will pay all of your current and future damage for the next 4 years based on expert opinion. If you sign a release right now and never come back to see me again, or I'll give you current damage and you can come back next year and the year after if you can present future damage. I'll pay it at that time. Almost everyone accepted money now for future damage. They didn't want to wait. They wanted the money now, and they accepted the responsibility for releasing any further claims against BP. Now, that's how the program worked. 92% of all eligible claimants voluntarily entered the program. I think it was a very good success. Only 8% of the harm victims decided to go to court to litigate rather than come into this very efficient and certain cost-effective program. And I think that other countries like Brazil, where there are environmental harm and environmental tragedy and physical injury and death, should at least look to this model as a possible avenue to explore in dealing with unprecedented, very extensive tragedy. And I would be glad to accept a few questions during this small time set aside for this talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Consegue colocar a gente... Ah, tá na tela já para ele ver. Thank you very much, Professor Feinberg. We will open for... You cannot see the audience, but we have hundreds of people here, and we will open for questions. I have some, but I want to know before that if anyone wants to make a question. Alguém tem alguma pergunta para o professor Feinberg? Quem preferir fazer em português, a gente vai se esforçar aqui para traduzir para ele. Dr. Rodrigo Mascarenhas.
Let me say one thing for your audience.
Yes.
all of my work on 9/11, the Victim Compensation Fund, the BP oil spill fund, it's all available on the internet. You can go online to the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund, the BP Gulf Coast Claims Facility Fund, and read all about what I've said in detail. There's much has been written about it, and it's all available on the internet and by email. Internet.
Thank you. I have two questions. Quer começar você? I have two questions. First, we saw the movie Worth.
Good.
Your work
Good.
there.
I'm glad you saw it.
Like the movie. And during the movie, there is a lot of discussion about the calculation of the amount offered to each victim. What are, in your experience, what would you say about that? What are the main rules one should follow when calculating the amount to be offered to each victim?
I have two comments about that. First, it is very important, if you can do it in an efficient way, to provide voluntarily anyone who wants a hearing the opportunity to be heard before the administrator. Very important. Now, in 9/11, there were 5,300 victims, dead and injured. So I had the luxury of offering a hearing to anyone who wanted to see me, either before I made the calculation of compensation or after I made the calculation. Either way, only once, either before, Mr. Feinberg, I want you to know the following before you calculate my damages, or after. Mr. Feinberg, I want to appeal to you because I don't think it's appropriate, the compensation. Take your pick, one or the other, purely voluntary. Half the people never wanted to come and see me. They didn't have to. They grieve in private. The other half wanted to see me, and we made time. The second point is the opposite of the first point. I think a single opportunity to be heard is very important, but only once. No appeals to the courts, no appeal to a committee or other individuals, or an appellate process, or a mediation process, or an arbitration process. None of those are a good idea, in my mind, for these unique programs. Do not provide appeals and mediation and arbitration and negotiation. No. In these programs, I find the most effective, efficient way with the most certainty is speed. You will receive compensation quickly. We paid $6.5 billion in BP out the door in 16 months. In 9/11, $7.1 billion completed in 33 months. You do not want to delay procedurally the quick, efficient payment to eligible claimants.
Thank you very much. We have a question from the audience.
Professor, if I understood it correctly, in the case of BP, Deep Horizon, there was no law imposing the negotiation. But in the case of September 11th, there was an act of Congress, and if I understood it correctly, what was the incentives for accepting a deal in the case of BP if you confront it with the tradition, as far as I know, the tradition of the U.S. tort law system of imposing very large amounts in terms of compensation? Thank you.
Very good questions. Now, first, in both 9/11 and BP, there were acts of Congress requiring these programs. 9/11, 13 days after the 9/11 attacks, Congress set up the program. BP, there was already a statute governing environmental oil disasters. It was already in place, but I still had to be appointed, and I had to design and administer that program as well. Now, what were the incentives? I'll tell you the incentives. Why would anybody voluntarily decide to participate in these programs? Why? One, speed. Speed. If you file a claim with Feinberg, you will be paid within 90 days. 90 days instead of years of litigation. Speed, speedy compensation. Second, generosity. I will pay you in 9/11, BP, I will pay you an amount that will not require you to go to court and risk losing the money. I will provide you certainty right now, and I will give you an amount that does not require you to retain the services of a lawyer. You can hire a lawyer if you want and pay that lawyer, or if you prefer, you can file a claim with me. I will, within 90 days, determine your eligibility and calculate your award. And that's two incentives. Third, transparency, certainty. Before I begin to evaluate claims, I publicly announce, here is the rules. Here are the terms and conditions of the program. Transparency. Here are the eligibility criteria. Do you work in the Gulf of Mexico? Do you work a mile from the shore? 5 miles from the shore? 20 miles from the shore? 50 miles from the shore? Here are the rules that will govern your application. If you want to submit a claim, here are the rules that will be followed by the administrator. And if you are a fisherman, the evidence is much simpler to evaluate your claim than if you own a golf course 50 miles from Florida and are arguing to me that you lost customers, clients, guests because of the oil spill. The evidentiary rules there are much more stringent. So it's all laid out. Cost, speed, efficiency, transparency, over in 90 days. That is an excellent question, series of questions.
Thank you. We have another one.
Must be an American lawyer. Must be an American lawyer who just asked those questions. Must be an American lawyer.
The question was from Rodrigo Mascarenhas, who is a state attorney who worked on the World Trade Center. So
He knows.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, in the World Trade Center, now that wasn't environmental, you see. That was traumatic death and injury from the airplanes. 97% of all the victims and their families voluntarily ended the program. Not mandated. Congress didn't require it. You had a choice. BP also, you had a choice. Voluntarily, people come into the program because it's transparent, it's simple, it's efficient, and it's speedy.
We have another question from Marcele Figueiredo, who is also a state attorney and studying in the United States recently.
Hello, Professor Feinberg. I watched the movie, your movie, I could say that. And the movie was focused on the amount of money that you would decide that people would receive from compensations. But and the movie focused on the definition of fairness. But I am curious about the criteria of the eligibility to participate in this program, because during the movie I was thinking about people who suffered some kind of emotional distress during the 9/11, and I was thinking about if these people were...
I can answer.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Couple of things about the movie. First of all, Michael Keaton
Professor Feinberg, the audio is failing.
did a pretty good job. Family. Have you lost me? Am I back?
Can you repeat? We heard until first of all Michael Keaton.
I just wanted to say Michael Keaton did a pretty good job in the movie playing me, portraying me, but my family thinks he should stick with Batman. He didn't really capture me very well. He should stay with Batman. But anyway, let me answer those very good questions. The 9/11 fund did not pay at 1 penny for mental anguish, mental suffering, PTSD. Why? Congress, in setting up the program in the statute, prohibited it. Prohibited it. Either death or physical injury was required. That's first. Congress was worried that if mental anguish, mental suffering could be compensated by itself without a physical injury, I'd receive millions of claims from American citizens watching the tragedy on CNN or MSNBC or television or radio. So Congress limited the eligibility to death, physical injury. Even as to physical injury, Congress said physical injury which occurred in the immediate aftermath of the attacks. In the immediate aftermath of the attacks. And if it's physical injury, in the immediate vicinity of the World Trade Center or the Pentagon. That was in the statute, and it required me in designing the rules of the program to tell innocent victims do not, you're not in the immediate vicinity of the buildings, the World Trade Center, injury wasn't immediate. We said 72 hours. If you didn't suffer an injury within 72 hours of 9/11, don't bother. The Congress rather expressly limited latent injuries. We want immediate injuries, immediate deaths. And if a individual lingered for a few weeks or a month and then died, ineligible. The Congress spoke in the statute.
Mais alguma pergunta? Professora Paula Costa. Professor Paula Costa Silva is with us. She's from Portugal, and she would make a question.
Lisbon. You must be from Lisbon.
And thank you, Professor Feinberg, for sharing your experience with us. What happened with those 8% who didn't enter the program? What happened to this 8% in the courts? And could you then understand why they didn't enter the program?
Yes. The 8% in BP or the 3% in 9/11, they went to court. They all settled their litigation years later. They never went to trial. Later on, they settled. Some may have received attorney's fees. They probably all received less. That was their choice. Now, there's two reasons they told me why they didn't enter these very speedy, efficient funds. One, only in a courtroom will we find out the real cause of the disasters. You're delivering money and we're signing a release, but we want to know why it happened, why the tragedy, who is at fault. And we want to litigate because that's the only way we will find this out. You won't tell us, you don't know. That was one reason they gave. The second reason they gave was in 9/11, they wanted to make the airlines safer, security. In BP, they wanted to make sure that oil rig exploration was made safer. Theories of litigation deterrence. The only way we can deter wrongdoing is through a lawsuit. And with a lawsuit, we may be able to get answers. Well, I explained to people I thought those were two reasons that didn't justify your going to court. I don't think you'll find out what happened in 9/11 or BP in a courtroom. And if you want to make the oil rig or you want to make the airline safer, let other people sue. You don't have to. I mean, how many people have to sue to make them safer? You'd be better off coming into the program. Most everybody agreed, but there were 8% in BP and 3% in 9/11 that decided to go to court and they settled.
Mais alguma pergunta? Any other question? Quer falar? Professor Feinberg, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your lessons. It was a pleasure and an honor to us in the State Attorney General's Office of Rio de Janeiro to have you here. Thank you very much. I hope we can, at some point, make a settlement to have you in Rio with us.
I assure you, based on what I know about this very important program and others similar, I know Brazil is addressing some of these issues. I will make myself available. I'm always here for friends in colleagues in Brazil, and I hope to be down to Rio and participate in a future conference. I want to thank all of you for the honor of inviting me. And thanks for watching the movie, by the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks.